Commander Jai-1 Park stood at the massive window of the Defense Command Center, watching the stars. Her hands were clasped behind her back, but her fingers couldn't stay still. The latest reports sat heavy in her mind. 3 more colonies lost. Millions dead. The Void Swarm was getting closer. "Commander," a soft voice broke through her thoughts. "The Council is ready." Jai-1 turned to face her aide. "Thank you." She straightened her silver uniform and walked toward the Council chamber. Each step echoed in the empty hallway. The Hanel capital city used to be full of life. Now, most people stayed in the underground shelters. The Council chamber doors slid open without a sound. 5 faces turned to look at her, all that remained of the original 12 council members. Councillor Herinli sat at the center, her usual calm expression replaced by dark circles under her eyes. "Commander Park," Herin said, "please share your report." Jai-1 touched her datapad, and a hologram filled the room. Red dots showed where the Void Swarm had destroyed their colonies. "Our defense systems are failing. The swarm adapts to each new weapon we create. They learn our patterns faster than we can make new ones." She paused. "At the current rate, they will reach our homeworld in 3 months." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. The Hanel had always been proud of their advanced technology. Their ships could travel between stars in days. Their cities floated in the clouds. Their computers could solve problems in seconds that would take others years. But none of it was enough against the Void Swarm. "What do you suggest?" Herin asked. Jai-1 took a deep breath. "I want to activate the beacon." The room erupted in voices. "The ancient beacon. It's too dangerous. We don't even know what it does. We can't trust alien technology." Herin raised her hand, and silence fell. "Commander, that beacon was found in ruins older than our civilization. We don't know who built it or why. Using it could bring something worse than the Void Swarm." "With respect, Counselor," Jai-1 said, "what could be worse than extinction?" She brought up another hologram, the beacon. It was a simple black cylinder, covered in markings no one could read. Their scientists had studied it for decades. They knew it could send a signal across the galaxy, but they had never dared to use it. "The beacon's signal will reach parts of the galaxy we've never explored," Jai-1 continued. "Yes, there are risks. But there might be someone out there who can help us. Someone who fights differently than we do. Someone the Void Swarm hasn't learned to beat yet." "You mean the primitive sectors?" One council member scoffed. "Those worlds barely have space travel. Some still burn fossil fuels. What could they possibly do against the Void Swarm?" "Maybe their primitive nature is exactly what we need," Jai-1 argued. "The swarm beats us because they learn our patterns. Our technology is perfect, predictable. But primitive species, they're unpredictable. They haven't optimized everything. They still try strange, inefficient solutions." She looked at each council member. "Sometimes imperfect is better than perfect." Herin studied Jai-1's face for a long moment. Then she turned to the council. "We will vote. The choice is simple. We either try the beacon or we accept our extinction." The vote was quick, 4-1 in favor. That evening, Jai-1 stood in the ancient ruins where they had found the beacon. Scientists worked around her, preparing to activate it. The black cylinder hummed softly, the strange markings beginning to glow. "Power levels rising," a scientist reported. "Signal charging. Whatever this thing is, it's more powerful than anything we've ever built." Jai-1 watched the beacon's glow grow brighter. "Send the message. Send everything. Our location, our situation, our plea for help. Send it all." The beacon pulsed once, and a wave of energy shot into space. For a moment, the stars seemed to ripple. "Signal sent," the scientist said. "Now we wait." Jai-1 looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, the Void Swarm was coming. And somewhere out there, she hoped, someone would hear their call. "Help us," she whispered to the stars. "Please, someone help us." She didn't know that in a distant part of the galaxy, on a ship called the HS Horizon, a primitive species called humans was about to receive their message. And everything was about to change. Captain Yoon Suk Choi was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm sounded. The HSS Horizon's bridge erupted into action as crew members rushed to their stations. His coffee cup clattered onto its magnetic holder as he straightened in his chair. "Report," he ordered. Science Officer Sun Mi Kang's fingers flew across her screen. "Sir, we're picking up a distress signal. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." She paused, frowning. "The power readings are off the charts. Put it on the main screen." The message filled the bridge's display. Strange symbols flashed and changed, but underneath them was a clear picture story. A civilization under attack, worlds being destroyed, and a desperate plea for help. "Can you trace it?" Yoon Suk asked. "Already did, Captain." Sun Mi pointed to a star map. "It's coming from the golden arm of the galaxy. That's the restricted zone. The area with the super advanced civilizations that won't talk to us." Yoon Suk leaned forward. The restricted zone was famous. Every human explorer knew about the advanced aliens who lived there, the ones who thought humans were too primitive to bother with. They had faster ships, better weapons, and technology that seemed like magic. And now they were asking for help. "Plot a course," he ordered. "Maximum speed." The Horizon's engines roared to life. It wasn't the fastest ship in the human fleet, but it was tough and reliable. Like most human ships, it was built to take a beating and keep going. 3 days later, they reached the source of the signal. The sight made everyone on the bridge gasp. A beautiful city floated in the clouds, its silver towers reaching toward space. But above it, massive defense stations hung in orbit, their weapons ready. The fear was clear. They were expecting an attack. "We're being hailed," Sun Mi reported. The screen lit up, showing Commander Jae-won Park's face. She stared at them with a mixture of surprise and disappointment. This is what answered our call," she asked someone off-screen. "A primitive human vessel." Yoon Suk kept his face neutral. "This is Captain Yoon Suk Choi of the HS Horizon. We received your distress signal and came to help." "But your ship," Jae-won looked confused. "It's made of metal. It uses chemical engines. You still have manual controls." "Yes," Yoon Suk smiled. "Sometimes the old ways work best." Before Jae-won could respond, alarms blared on both ships. Sun Mi jumped in her seat. "Multiple contacts," she shouted. "Coming in fast. They don't match any known signatures." On the screen, Jae-won's face went pale. "The Void Swarm. They found us." The space around them seemed to ripple, and strange ships appeared. They looked like dark clouds given form, shifting and changing as they moved. The Hanel defense stations opened fire with energy weapons, but the Void Swarm ships simply changed shape to avoid the shots. "Their weapons are useless," Sun Mi reported, studying her readings. "The swarm adapts to energy patterns. They learn to avoid them." Yoon Suk watched the battle for a moment. Then he smiled. "Good thing we don't use energy weapons. Lieutenant Jin Ho, load the kinetic rounds." "Sir." Jin Ho grinned. "The big rocks. The biggest we've got." The Horizon's weapon bays opened, revealing what looked like simple rail guns. They were crude by Hanel standards, just electromagnetic launchers that fired solid metal rounds at high speed. The first shot caught a Void Swarm ship by surprise. It tried to shift its form, but physics didn't care. The metal slug tore through it, sending pieces spinning into space. The second and third shots did the same. On the screen, Jae-won's eyes went wide. How are you hitting them?" "They can learn to avoid energy patterns," Yoon Suk explained. "But they can't argue with Newton's laws. A rock is a rock." More Void Swarm ships appeared, but now they were keeping their distance from the Horizon. For the first time, they seemed unsure. "Commander Park," Yoon-suk said, I think it's time we had a proper talk. Your people have the technology, and we have, let's call it experience. Together, we might just have a chance. Jae-won looked at the damaged Void Swarm ships, then back at Yoon-suk. Perhaps, she said slowly, we have something to learn from your primitive ways. The Horizon's crew cheered as the Void Swarm retreated. It wasn't a major victory, but it was a start, and it proved something important. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best one, even if that solution was just throwing really big rocks really fast. Lieutenant Jin-ho Ryu stood in front of the Hanul War Council, pointing at a simple paper map spread on the table. The Hanul officers looked confused. They were used to holograms and computer displays, not paper and markers. This is how we fight, Jin-ho said. We don't need fancy computers. Sometimes the old ways work better. Commander Jae-won watched with interest. After the HSS Horizon's success against the Void Swarm, she had invited the humans to share their military knowledge. What she saw both shocked and fascinated her. You mean to tell me, one Hanul officer said, that humans still study battles from thousands of years ago? Yes, Jin-ho smiled. Because the basics of war never change, only the tools do. He pointed to the map again. Take guerrilla warfare. Hit hard, move fast, never be where the enemy expects you. Engineer Yun-ho Kwon stepped forward. She had spent the last week studying both Hanul and Void Swarm technology. The Void Swarm beat you because they learn your patterns. Your ships always use the same tactics, the same formation, the same weapons. You try to be perfect. That's your weakness. The Hanul officers muttered among themselves. Being called imperfect was usually an insult, but after seeing the humans fight, they were starting to think differently. Show us, Jae-won said. Later that day, they ran the first test. A Hanul ship hung in space, but it was different now. Engineer Yun-ho had helped them add simple metal plates over their energy shields. They had installed old-style chemical thrusters alongside their gravity drives. The ship looked ugly, patched together, very un-Hanul. The Void Swarm attacked right on schedule. Their dark ships flowed through space like angry clouds. They expected the Hanul ship to fight the same way it always did. They were wrong. The Hanul ship fired its chemical thrusters, spinning in a way that should have been impossible with gravity drives. When the Void Swarm adapted to block their energy weapons, the ship launched simple metal spears, just sharp pieces of metal shot out by springs. When the swarm tried to predict their movement patterns, the ship did something completely random. Watch this, Jin-ho said over the radio. He pressed a button. The metal plates covering the ship suddenly broke apart. The Void Swarm, expecting a trick, moved to avoid them. But they weren't weapons. They were just cover for the real surprise. Hidden behind them were dozens of small pods. We call these mines, Jin-ho explained. No energy signature, no complex computers, just simple triggers and big explosions. The pods drifted into the Void Swarm's formation. When the dark ships touched them, the pods exploded. Not with energy beams or plasma, just good old-fashioned chemical explosions. The swarm couldn't adapt to pure force. In the command center, the Hanul officers watched in amazement. The single ship had just destroyed 12 Void Swarm vessels without using any advanced technology. I don't understand, one officer said. Everything about this is wrong, inefficient, crude. Exactly, Engineer Yun-ho smiled. That's why it works. The Void Swarm learns patterns, but how can they learn when there is no pattern? When every ship fights differently? When some weapons are high-tech and others are just rocks? Commander Jae-won walked over to the tactical display. How long would it take to modify our whole fleet? A few days, Yun-ho said. The changes aren't complex. That's the point. Do it, Jae-won ordered. And Lieutenant Jin-ho, I want you to teach our crews these guerrilla tactics. Jin-ho bowed slightly. It would be my honor. But first, Let me tell you about something humans call playing dirty. For the first time in months, the Hanel officers laughed. They were starting to understand that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most advanced one. Sometimes you just needed to be unpredictable. As they began planning their next moves, engineer Yunho worked on more modifications. She mixed Hanel technology with simple human mechanics. Every ship would be different. Every weapon would be a surprise. The Void Swarm was about to learn that perfection wasn't everything. And somewhere out in space, the Void Swarm was facing something they had never encountered before. An enemy they couldn't predict. An enemy that didn't follow logical patterns. An enemy that was proudly, purposefully imperfect. The real war was about to begin. Medical Officer Min Ji-song stared at the Hanel Medical Bay in wonder. The room was filled with advanced healing pods and automated systems. Everything was clean, efficient, and perfect. Maybe too perfect. "You mean," she said to the Hanel doctor, "you don't do surgery by hand anymore?" "Of course not," the Hanel doctor replied. "Our machines are perfect. They never make mistakes." Min Ji pulled out her old-fashioned medical bag. But what happens when the machines break? Or when you face something new that the machines don't know about? The Hanel doctor had no answer. This was the problem Min Ji had seen throughout the Hanel civilization. They depended too much on their perfect technology. In another part of the city, cultural attaché Tai Young Kim was teaching a group of Hanel children about Earth's history. The children sat on the floor, eyes wide as he showed them simple paper pictures. "Humans fought wars for thousands of years," he explained. "Each time we lost, we learned. Each time we won, we learned more. We kept all this knowledge. But why study the past?" One child asked. "Isn't new always better?" Tae-young smiled. "New isn't always better. Sometimes old solutions work best. Like the story of David and Goliath, where a small human with a simple stone defeated a giant with advanced armor." The children leaned forward, hungry for more stories. They had never heard tales like this. Their history was all about progress, about making things better and more perfect. Meanwhile, Commander Jae-won was having dinner with Captain Yoon-suk in the Horizon's simple dining room. She picked at her food. Real cooked meat and vegetables, not the perfect nutrient paste she was used to. "This is strange," she said. "The taste is different every bite." "That's the point," Yoon-suk smiled. "Humans love variety. We could make perfect food like yours, but we choose not to. Imperfection makes life interesting." Jae-won took another bite. "Thinking. Like your fighting styles. Like your medicine. Like your stories. Everything you do embraces chaos." "Not chaos," Yoon-suk corrected. "Adaptability. When things are too perfect, they become brittle. Break one part, and the whole thing fails. But when things are adaptable, they bend instead of breaking." Later that day, Min Ji was teaching Hanel doctors how to do simple surgery by hand. Many were frustrated. Their hands weren't as steady as machines, but slowly they began to understand. Hands could feel things machines couldn't. Hands could adapt to surprises. "Remember," Min Ji said, guiding a young doctor's hands, "perfect isn't always best. Sometimes you need to feel your way through a problem." In the military training room, Lieutenant Jin-ho watched Hanel soldiers practice old Earth martial arts. They had always relied on powered armor and energy weapons. Now they were learning to fight with their bodies, to think on their feet. "Your body can't be hacked," Jin-ho told them. "Your instincts can't be predicted by a computer. That's why the Void Swarm struggles against us." Engineer Yunho worked with Hanel technicians, teaching them to make repairs without computers. "Sometimes," she said, hitting a stuck engine part with a wrench, "you just need to give it a good whack." The Hanel were changing. Little by little, they were learning to embrace imperfection. Children played messy games instead of perfect simulations. Cooks tried making real food instead of nutrient paste. Scientists began trying crazy ideas instead of just following computer models. That evening, Commander Jai-1 stood with Captain Yoon-suk, watching the sunset. The sky was filled with colors that weren't quite perfect, and that made them beautiful. "I understand now," she said softly. "We thought being perfect would save us, but perfection made us weak. We forgot how to adapt, how to change, how to survive. That's why the Void Swarm beats perfect enemies." Yoon-suk nodded. "Perfect things follow patterns. Perfect things can't adapt. But humans, we're the kings and queens of adaptation. We're proud of it." A alarm sounded. Another Void Swarm attack was coming. But this time, Jae-1 smiled. Her people were ready. They would fight with both technology and instinct, with both perfect weapons and imperfect surprises. The Void Swarm was about to learn that the Hunnel weren't perfect anymore, and that made them stronger than ever. The alarm screamed through every ship and station. Tactical Officer Du Yun-ba's eyes went wide as he stared at his screen. "This is the biggest Void Swarm fleet we've ever seen. Hundreds of ships." Commander Jai-1 and Captain Yoon-suk stood side by side on the bridge of the combined fleet's command ship. The view screen showed a terrifying sight. The space ahead was turning black with Void Swarm ships. "They're desperate," Yoon-suk said. "They know we're hurting them. This is their big push to finish us." Jai-1 nodded. "All ships, battle positions. Remember your training. Fight like humans." The fleet that faced the Void Swarm looked strange. Every ship was different. Some had energy weapons, some had rail guns, some were covered in metal plates, others showed their shields proudly. The Void Swarm's computers couldn't find any pattern to analyze. "First wave, attack pattern thunder," Du Yun called out. The humans had named all their attack patterns after weather, because weather was natural and unpredictable. The first group of ships shot forward, but instead of firing their weapons, they released clouds of simple metal dust. The Void Swarm ships flew through it, probably thinking it was harmless. "Now," Du Yun shouted. Every ship activated their energy shields at full power. The metal dust lit up with electricity. The Void Swarm ships caught in it started to break apart. Second wave, pattern lightning. Another group of ships moved in. Some fired energy beams, some fired solid shots, some released mines. Each ship fought differently. The Void Swarm couldn't adapt to all the different attacks at once. On his ship, Engineer Yun-ho watched her newest invention work. She had put simple rotating mirrors on some ships. When the Void Swarm's energy attacks came in, the mirrors bounced them back randomly. The swarm couldn't predict where their own shots would go. "Keep changing it up," Ju-1 ordered. "Don't let them learn our patterns." The battle was huge and messy. Hunnel ships spun and rolled in ways that looked wrong but worked perfectly. Human ships charged straight into fights, shooting old-style bullets and missiles alongside high-tech weapons. The Void Swarm began to show signs of confusion. Their ships moved less smoothly, sometimes bumping into each other. They were trying to adapt to too many things at once. "They're struggling," Du Yun reported. "Their response time is getting slower. They can't process all the different threats." Then came the biggest surprise. From behind the fleet, huge cargo ships appeared. They opened their doors and dumped their cargo. Millions of tons of simple space rock. The Void Swarm's sensors focused on the fleet's weapons, ignoring the harmless rocks. That was a mistake. The rocks crashed through their formation, smashing ships apart. There was nothing to adapt to. It was just gravity and mass doing what they had done for billions of years. "Pattern storm," Ju-1 ordered. "Everyone attack at once. Every ship, use whatever weapons you want." The combined fleet charged. Energy beams crossed paths with physical bullets. Some ships rammed the enemy with reinforced hulls. Others laid traps with simple net-like devices that tangled the Void Swarm ships. The Void Swarm's perfect formations broke apart. For the first time, they started to retreat in disorder. Their ships are sending out distress signals, Du Yun said excitedly. They're calling for help. The Void Swarm is calling for help. The bridge crew cheered. They had done it. The biggest Void Swarm fleet ever seen was running away. Later, as they counted their victories, Jai-Won found Captain Yoon-suk in the observation room. I never thought I'd see this day, she said. The Void Swarm running away. And all because we learned to be imperfect. Yoon-suk smiled. Not imperfect. Adaptable. Like nature itself. The Void Swarm can learn patterns, but nature has no pattern. That's why they can't beat it. Like weather, Jai-Won nodded. Like rocks in space. Like human beings. Across the fleet, crews celebrated. Hanel and humans together had found a way to beat an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. Not with perfect technology, but with a perfect mix of old and new, planned and random, high-tech and no-tech. The Void Swarm had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you can't predict. And nobody was more unpredictable than humans and their new Hanel friends. The war wasn't over. But today, everything had changed. Today was the day the Void Swarm learned to fear. Commander Hai-Jin Nam stood before the combined fleet of human and Hanel ships. Each ship showed marks from previous battles, dents, patches, and repairs. 6 months ago, the Hanel would have called these ships ugly. Now they saw the beauty in their battle scars. Today, we stop running, Hai-Jin announced over the fleet channel. Today, we hunt the Void Swarm. The fleet was massive. Hundreds of ships, each one different from the others. Some were pure Hanel design, others pure human. Most were a mix of both, strange but effective combinations of advanced technology and simple solutions. Commander Jai-Won's voice joined in. We found their home system. The place where they rebuild their fleets. Today, we end this war. The fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel. Human ships used their simple but reliable jump drives. Hanel ships used their more advanced systems. They traveled in small groups, taking different paths. The Void Swarm couldn't predict where they would all appear. Engineer Yun-ho ran final checks on their newest weapons. She had worked with both human and Hanel engineers to create them. Remember, she told the weapons crews, switch between weapon types randomly. Don't let them adapt. The fleet dropped out of light speed around a strange star system. The sun was almost hidden behind a cloud of dark ships, the heart of the Void Swarm. They never expected us to find them, Tactical Officer Du Yun said. They never thought we'd be brave enough to attack. The Void Swarm reacted quickly, their ships forming into perfect patterns. But the human Hanel fleet didn't form any pattern at all. Each ship group chose its own way to fight. Group Thunder released the nets. Hai-Jin ordered. Large nets made of simple metal wire spread through space. The Void Swarm ignored them. They looked too primitive to be a threat. But when the nets touched their ships, hidden electric charges activated. The nets wrapped around the swarm ships, trapping them. Group Lightning. Attack pattern rain. Another group of ships moved in. They had replaced their energy weapons with simple pressurized tanks of water. In space, the water froze instantly into clouds of ice crystals. The ice stuck to the Void Swarm ships, jamming their ability to change shape. The Void Swarm tried to adapt, but each human Hanel group used different tactics. Some ships launched old-style nuclear weapons, simple but powerful. Others used Hanel's most advanced energy beams. Some just threw huge rocks at high speed. They're trying to retreat. Du Yun reported. Their patterns are breaking down. But Hai-Jin smiled. Not this time. Release the special weapon. Engineer Yun-ho pressed a button. Thousands of tiny pods shot out from the fleet. Each pod contained a simple radio transmitter broadcasting random signals on all frequencies. The Void Swarm's communication network was suddenly filled with noise. Their ships can't talk to each other, Yun-ho explained. They can't share information about what works and what doesn't. Each ship has to figure things out alone. Without their shared intelligence, the Void Swarm ships began to fail. Some tried to block energy weapons but got hit by physical attacks. Others changed shape to dodge bullets, but flew right into energy beams. "Push forward," Hai-Jin ordered. "Don't give them time to think." The human Hanel fleet charged. They had trained for this, practiced fighting in chaos. The Void Swarm hadn't. They could only fight perfectly. And perfect wasn't good enough anymore. Hour after hour, the battle raged. The Void Swarm's numbers dropped. Their perfect formations fell apart. Their home system, which had seemed so strong, was becoming their trap. Finally, Hai-Jin gave the last order. "All ships, attack the star shield. Everything you've got." The fleet fired everything. Energy beams, bullets, missiles, rocks, frozen water, electromagnetic pulses, even simple explosives. The cloud hiding the star broke apart. For the first time, in maybe thousands of years, sunlight touched the Void Swarm's home. "They're running," Du Yun shouted. "Really running. Their ships are jumping away in all directions." The crews cheered. The Void Swarm's main fleet was destroyed. Their home was exposed. They would need years, maybe decades, to rebuild, if they even could. Later, Hai-Jin met with Jai-1 on the command ship. "We did it," she said simply. Jai-1 nodded. "Because we learned to be unpredictable. Because we learned that perfect isn't always right." "No," Hai-Jin smiled. "Because we learned from each other, humans and Hanel together. That's what made us strong." The war wasn't completely over. Some Void Swarm ships had escaped, but their main force was broken. Their perfect system had failed, and two civilizations had learned that being different, being unpredictable, being imperfect, that was the greatest strength of all. 1 year after the Great Battle, the Hanel capital city looked very different. The perfect silver towers now had gardens growing on them. Children played in parks that weren't perfectly square. And in the main square, a new monument stood, a simple stone statue of a human hand and a Hanel hand clasped together. Commander Jai-1 stood with Captain Yoon-suk, watching ships land at the spaceport. Some were sleek Hanel vessels, others were sturdy human ships. Many were new designs that mixed both styles. "Remember when we first met?" Jai-1 asked. "I thought you were too primitive to help us." Yoon-suk laughed. "And now look at your ships. Some of them are even uglier than ours." "Not ugly," Jai-1 corrected. "Battle-tested. Like that old Earth saying you taught me. If it looks stupid but works, it isn't stupid." They walked through the city together. In one area, Engineer Yun-ho was teaching a class. Young Hanel and human students worked side by side, learning to mix high technology with simple mechanics. "Today we're learning about backup systems," Yun-ho told her class. "Sometimes the best backup for a computer is a plain old lever." In the military academy, Lieutenant Jin-ho watched Hanel and human soldiers train together. Some practiced with energy weapons, others with simple projectile guns. All of them learned to be unpredictable. "The Void Swarm is still up there," Jin-ho reminded them. "But now we know how to fight them. Not with perfect patterns, but with perfect chaos." At the hospital, Medical Officer Minji worked with Hanel doctors. Their healing pods now had manual controls. Doctors learned both automatic and hand surgery. They were ready for anything. "Balance," Minji often said. "Use the machines when they work best. Use your hands when they work best. Never depend too much on either." In the Science Center, Cultural Attaché Tai Young sat with Hanel historians. They were recording the story of the war, but not just the victories. They recorded the mistakes, the failed attempts, the lessons learned. "Future generations need to know," Tai Young said. "Perfect isn't always best. Sometimes you need to try the crazy ideas." That evening, a great celebration began. It was 1 year since the Void Swarm's defeat. The city glowed with lights, some electric, some simple fire. Music played from both advanced synthesizers and traditional instruments. Commander Hai-Jin raised a glass. "To victory," she said. "Not because we were stronger or more advanced, but because we learned to be different, to be unexpected, to be ourselves." The crowd cheered. Humans and Hanel celebrated together, eating both perfect nutrient cubes and messy, delicious cooked food. Do Yun brought news from the defense fleet. The few remaining Void Swarm ships stayed far away now. They had learned their lesson. They couldn't beat an enemy they couldn't predict. Late that night, Ji-Won and Yoom-Suk stood on a balcony, looking at the stars. A small black cylinder sat on the table between them, the ancient beacon that had started it all. "We still don't know who made it," Ji-Won said. "Who left it for us to find?" "Maybe they knew," Yoom-Suk suggested. "Maybe they knew that sometimes the ones who seem primitive are exactly the ones you need." "Maybe," Ji-Won smiled. "Or maybe they just knew that the strongest force in the universe isn't perfect technology. It's the ability to adapt, to change, to work together." Below them, the celebration continued. Human children played with Hanel toys. Hanel engineers tested new human-style machines. Two civilizations that once thought they had nothing in common now knew better. The Void Swarm had taught them all a lesson. Perfect isn't always right. Advanced isn't always best. Sometimes the strongest thing you can be is unpredictable. Sometimes the best solution is the simple one. And sometimes, when you send a desperate call for help into space, the ones who answer might not be what you expected. They might be primitive. They might be imperfect. They might be exactly what you need. In the sky above, the stars shone down on a changed civilization. The Hanel would never be the same. They had learned to embrace chaos, to love imperfection, to find strength in change. And it all started because they called for help, and only humans arrived.